The saleswoman, the children, their parents. Everyone was looking at little cranky Kate, who for 15 minutes had been insistently begging her mother for the biggest doll in the store. "Where are we going to put it? It's very expensive. Why do you need such a huge one?" These and other phrases were used by Tati, Kate's mom, to talk her daughter out of this rash purchase. But that day, she still had to carry the huge plastic beauty home. The girl hugged and kissed her big doll all evening and all night until she fell asleep, played with her, even gave her tea. She fell into a happy sleep with a feeling of the world's greatest love and happiness. Kate was not only a welcome child for her mother and father, but a long-awaited one as well. They were both in their 30s, and Tati and Rin had known each other for what seemed like an eternity. But there was no child in the family for years, and in the small town where they were from, of course such matters were considered something unacceptable, even indecent. Now and then there were rumors about the Swans, that they were a dysfunctional family, that they were generally selfish and lived for themselves. Tati was often upset. She knew about these conversations, but the most important thing was that both she and her husband had wanted to hear children's laughter in the apartment for a very long time. In return, for years, an unbearable silence stood in the couple's house, killing them and gradually alienating them from each other. And how do you know what was in store for Tati and Rina if one day his wife did not come from the clinic with the long-awaited news? "Rin, we're having a baby." Those words changed the entire life of the Swan family. Their relationship has grown warmer and stronger than ever with Kate's arrival. Spouses' soul in each other, trifles on which they used to nag each other, dissolved in a world of love, harmony, and mutual understanding. And little Kate became everything to them, the meaning of life and a reason to wake up, to work, to dream, to make plans. Since she was a little girl, Kate began to notice how her own mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, and uncle revolved around her alone. Uncle Kevin and Aunt Regina were childless, so they gave all their paternal and maternal affection to their niece. Tati, on the other hand, had a very difficult labor, and the doctor's verdict was, "You will never be able to have children," they informed her and her spouse. In this way, no one could breed in the little girl neither insecurity nor jealousy. On the contrary, Kate's sense of self-importance and sometimes even selfishness became stronger and stronger every year. Back in high school, she was used to having the best dresses, the best notebooks, the best friends and girlfriends. And the parents had nowhere to go. They continued to admire their only child and try to fulfill her every whim. All this would have gone on for ages if one day a grown-up 18-year-old girl had not announced to her parents that she was leaving for Chicago to go to university. Kate was not going to try her luck in the capital alone. She had a young man named Danny. The girl had already had experience of relationships with guys, but not a month passed until the moment when she realized, "Not mine." And sometimes that most of all annoyed fastidious in all respects Kate, that some guys themselves informed her about the non-seriousness of intentions and not reciprocity of feelings. At such moments, her ego and confidence in her exclusivity and uniqueness were dealt a heavy blow. One day she was tired of telling her college friends about how perfect her relationship with the next partner was. One day, at a local disco, she spotted a young man who was huddled with his friends in a corner of the dance floor and seemed to be discussing some important matters. Danny was good-looking, slightly wavy dark hair, thick, severe eyebrows, a large nose and slightly bulging cheekbones, all of which Kate had fallen in love with. Danny was dark-skinned, of medium height, but stocky and muscular. He was cheerful and fun-loving, but at the same time, a pensive expression almost never left his face. Girls loved him, but it was rare to meet a guy with even one of them. In general, he was an enigma made of opposites. They met glances in the noisy crowd of dancing youth, and after the first conversation, Kate realized that this one would not offend. It was very important for her, at that period of her life, to assert herself among her friends, to maintain the bar of the most successful and happy girl in the neighborhood, and that's why she chose Danny, who was kind and in love with her. Danny was indeed very happy to meet his future sweetheart. Kate was also a beautiful girl. Big brown eyes, beautiful oval face, slender figure, and beautiful long hair, all the time tucked in a ponytail. Kate was like that. She never suffered from lack of attention, And how many men's hearts, just by the age of 18, she broke. The announcement to his mother and father of his sudden decision had caused the Swans, if not scandal, then misunderstanding. Scandal, by the way, was almost never a thing in this house. In return, however, the parents kept all their secret unkind thoughts about their daughter's behavior and her attitude toward life unspoken, and it seemed as if they were ready to pour out everything that had accumulated inside them to Kate that difficult day. "Kate, why do you want to go to Chicago? Aren't you going to finish college?" My father resented me. "Dad, come on. I've told you and Mom many times that I have nothing to do here," the girl said. "Kate, I'm sorry, but Tati Viktorovna told me that you have bad results." Now my mother was indignant. "I?" Kate turned to her mother nonchalantly. "What do you mean? And you want to go to Chicago? You want to go to a big finance school? Are you sure you can do that?" Mom asked. "I'm sure. All I ask is that you give me some money to live on, and then I'll give it to you myself," she tried to convince them. Tati was a wise woman. In her 50s, she understood how the world worked and what dangers might await her daughter in the big city, in the capital of the motherland, where there were many temptations, enticements, and dangers. It pained her now to hear all this arrogant and self-righteous speech of her favorite daughter, and of course, like her father, she wanted Kate to stay in her hometown and not chase, in her understanding, the best. On the other hand, she, like many others who knew Kate, was sometimes amazed at her stubbornness. She set clear goals and achieved them, even if they were not always adequate. So Tati and Rin had to accept Kate's decision to go to Chicago, and the first financial aid from them came to her the very next day after the tense conversation. What about the beloved fiancé? He was even more depressed and confused than Kate's parents. He liked the house. He loved his family. Mother and stepfather were always happy to help the guy and support him in a difficult situation. Danny studied at the technical school on the auto mechanic, and he received from his specialty one pleasure. Danny always felt that Kate didn't have enough to offer, and her decision to go to Chicago was a fairly predictable event for the guy. But there was nothing to do, and he agreed to go to the capital with Kate. But what he would do there, Danny didn't know at all. One day her college friend Angie came to Kate's apartment, left to her by her grandparents who had moved to live out of town. She already knew about the girl's decision. Kate put the kettle on and put all the sweets she had on the table. "Help yourself," she told her friend with a smug smile. "Kate, how can you do that?" "Leaving," Angie said sadly. "Well, I'm not leaving alone, so I'll be fine, and I'll be coming." Kate smiled embarrassedly. What about Danny? How did he react?" Angie asked. What about Danny? What's he got to do with it?" She didn't understand. Kate's words surprised her friend. Angie listened to her stories about how much Danny loved her, what a happy, understanding, and harmonious couple they were. Now it was as if she didn't recognize that loving and lofty person who had become an indifferent and overly practical lady overnight. "Why did you bring him with you then?" Angie asked, puzzled. "I'm carrying? Are you stupid or what? He's coming with me. And anyway, am I going to Chicago alone?" Kate said emotionally. "Oh, what's the big deal?" Galia asked. "First of all, who's going to earn money to rent an apartment? I'll be studying. And, secondly, alone in a foreign city." Kate looked her naive friend in the eyes with a smile. "So you're just using it?" Angie wondered. "Oh, you're so full of it. You don't know anything. He's going to get in too. And anyway." Kate paused, considering her next words. "What do you care about us? Vince and I love each other. You don't have to pry into our personal lives." Kate began to resent him. When Angie left, Kate sprawled on the couch and exhaled unhappily, staring at the ceiling. She realized that the beautiful words about her love for Danny hadn't made her friend feel any better about the unpleasant impressions she'd gotten from her sudden revelations. It happens often, especially for women, when you let yourself say a little more than you had planned, and then you torture yourself about the consequences of your spoken thoughts. Kate didn't suffer for long, though. It wasn't in her nature to do that sort of thing. She lounged on the couch for a while and dialed Donnie's number. A few days before Donnie and Kate left for Chicago, they had a long and intense conversation. Her beloved wanted her fiancé not only to go with her, but also to go to university. What? What law school? He rolled his eyes in surprise at Kate. You said you were good at this. You'll apply. And then we'll see, she said calmly. It was as if she had planned it all out a long time ago. Danny, on the other hand, never had plans to become a lawyer. Kate, come on, what law school? I have to work and go to school. Is that okay? Danny resented it. You can study in the evenings. Part-time Danny didn't want to continue this, as he thought, meaningless dialogue. What was his soul made up to again? He had been living with her like a volcano for a long time. Kate's plans were constantly erupting, one crazier than the other. And all of them had one common feature: the desire for better, bigger, richer, newer, in a word, to a phantom ideal that had long ago formed in the girl's head. And yet, already by the time she left, Kate managed to persuade the unhappy guy, who simply loved her and didn't want to lose what he had. At first, it was not easy for the young people to settle down in Chicago. Danny almost immediately had to get a job as a loader, and Kate began to prepare for enrollment. They arrived in May, so the girl had some time to prepare for classes. But as her young man noticed, she often preferred, instead of preparing, browsing fashion magazines and hanging out on the new popular social network. She was constantly changing her photos. She always did not like something the background was too uninteresting, or the face is not so turned, or trouble with the hair. In general, the girl was not engaged in financial literacy and photo editing. Kate was caught by Danny, who came home from work terribly tired and hungry. Kate, I'm hungry. Did you make something? He asked. Oh, the girl smiled. I got carried away with the preparations. Go to the nearest store and buy us something, Zai, she asked him. The man was dumbfounded by such words. He could hardly stand on his feet. He had not come from a walk or entertainment, and of course he expected some other, more comfortable end of the day. Here he was asked to go to the store and buy something. Danny, as well as Kate's parents, as well as all her friends and acquaintances, fell before the girl's sometimes excessive insolence and impudence. She put herself in such a way that no one could ever contradict her. If on her way and met those who were ready to give her a verbal rebuff, she preferred to immediately erase them from her life. Later, Kate liked to ride on the personality of those insolent in a conversation with mutual acquaintances. She did not forgive people any insignificant criticism in her address, even if it was constructive. All this did not fit into the world picture of a narcissistic girl. However, that day Danny was extremely disappointed with his girlfriend and could not, as he usually did, keep silent and go to bed. Tired and a little annoyed, he decided to continue the conversation. Preparation, Kate? Seriously? You've been changing your avatar for days. I've never seen you with your manuals, the guy said indignantly. Calm down and go to the store. I'm just taking a break, she said, standing up from the couch and picking up the first book she could find. She unfolded it to a random page, sat back in her chair, and making a concentrated expression on her face, stared at the lines. Danny stood there for another half a minute, waiting for something he didn't understand. He felt at that moment, perhaps for the first time, how his attitude towards his beloved changed. The young man was ready to leave everything and go back to his hometown. That didn't happen. But Kate wasn't getting any more attentive and caring. Danny had to put up with dumplings for almost every dinner and the girl's perpetual busyness with no idea what she was doing. However, the guy had bad thoughts in his heart. What if she doesn't get in? What if she wants me to pull her paid education? Or from her unfortunate parents will be begging for money? And what if she wants to retake next year? So, more and more often, Danny fell asleep. Each new question in his head was even heavier than the previous one, and they all remained unanswered. But the young man didn't get to know his favorite girl that well in 6 months. Kate, if she makes up her mind, she'll do it. The people closest to her said of her. And they were right. Going to Chicago was not a frivolous act. She knew she wouldn't be returning to her hometown anytime soon, and most importantly, she knew that she was going to get into the finance school she'd been eyeing for a year. That awe-inspiring time is upon us. It was entrance exam time. Danny and Kate were going to enter the same university. Unlike his girlfriend, Danny was not so confident in his abilities. He did not prepare much because his work schedule did not allow him to leave enough time for himself, But he wasn't nervous and didn't worry about possible failure. The main thing was that Kate was near, and the rest was not so important for him. Of all the possible scenarios, the most unhappy one happened. Neither Kate nor Donnie got a passing grade to enter the university. That evening, the young man expected to see his love sad and depressed. He was already thinking and searching for the most appropriate words to cheer her up and reassure her. Failure wasn't easy for Kate, and Donnie knew it. What was the lad's surprise when Kate entered the room calm, but only slightly pensive. "What are we going to do next?" Danny asked her. They were both lying on the big sofa watching a program on TV. It was late in the evening, and the one bedroom they were renting was stuffy, despite all the windows being open. "Yeah, I'm sure they've messed something up. I'll go to the admissions office tomorrow," Kate said nonchalantly. "What makes you so sure you got a score?" "It's a serious university, by the way, and not everyone goes there," he said. "Dan, I'm confident in myself. I've been preparing to go there for over a year." "Don't worry, I'll figure it out," the girl answered confidently. Danny could only shrug his shoulders and shake his head disapprovingly. He thankfully didn't know what Kate was capable of in the way of achieving her goal. The very next day, she went to the admissions office. Danny, as usual, went to work unloading the goods. Kate was extraordinarily beautiful, and even perhaps a little too sexy for her presence in an institution of higher learning. She put on her highest heels and wore a blouse with cleavage. The girl even had time to stop by for a manicure. Her whole appearance was like saying, "I'm available." Danny didn't like this Kate blouse. He saw that it was too revealing. He never made the girl jealous, but sometimes asked her to be more modest in dress and behavior. And when Kate was going to her exams, he strongly advised. "Kate, I'm begging you, don't wear it today," he was saying. Now she remembered that it was time to take out her gorgeous silver silk blouse, which had the top button so obscenely low. The skirt on the girl was not the most modest either. It was close to a mini, but being a little longer, it gave the image some slight piquancy. 5 o'clock in the evening, the admissions committee was finishing its work. Kate knew who she was going to see. She'd met this imposing middle-aged man several times when she'd come here for the exam and the application process. Back in her hometown, she studied the composition of the finance faculty committee. Almost every university already had its own website, where you could find information about enrollment, faculties, and teachers. Vince was the chancellor of a new but already positively established university. The man was about 50, but he considered himself not just young, but a very energetic and interesting person. In fact, he was. His hair had not yet turned gray. Watson was a brunette of rather large build and tall, with a tanned face and big brown eyes. His smile had charmed more than one issue of young female financiers. And he too, being still a simple teacher, did not lose time during his fascinating lectures to pass a couple of circles around the desk of a charming student or to make some insignificant compliment to the naive freshman. For more than a year now, his life had been much more boring than before. The rector saw around him only tense colleagues, a pile of papers and continuous meetings. Where did the young beautiful nymphs, thirsty for knowledge, go? All of them sat in boring classes and listened to boring teachers on business, management, and other sciences, given, well, not every one of them. Kate decided to snatch Watson and talk to him face to face. She stood outside his office, knowing that he had been there for half an hour. As luck would have it, the dean of the PR management faculty was a guest of the rector, and judging by the sounds coming from the small office, they were discussing something very heatedly. Kate was determined, but something about the moment of anticipation frightened her. She began to replay in her head all the possible situations when she met the rector. She realized that she didn't know him at all. Should we leave before it's too late, she thought. But always knowing what she needed, Kate overcame her fear rather quickly. She whispered to herself, "Oh, really? It's going to be great." The conversation between the chancellor and the dean ended pleasantly enough, and the woman who had left the office even laughed as she said, "Oh, come on, Vince, don't do that. We'll take care of this ourselves." When Kate's former student approached the rector's door, it opened immediately, and the astonished Vince stopped abruptly. "Excuse me, are you here to see me?" he asked. "Yes." "Good afternoon," the girl said very confidently and looking directly into the man's eyes. "Then please wait a minute or two, I need to step back," Come into the office for now and make yourself comfortable." Watson left. Kate was alone in the small but expensively furnished room. She looked at the desk, the laptop standing on it, and the glass door closet behind which many awards in the form of certificates, cups, and diplomas stood on shelves. Yes, a rich uncle. Ah, also how many merits, thought the girl who was waiting for the rector. On the table, near the laptop on a cardboard leg, was a photo. The girl was surprised that Watson was with a woman in the photo. His face full of love and happiness clearly said that it was not a colleague or a friend. Kate knew that the rector was not married. The door opened. Watson strode leisurely into the office. He sat down smoothly in his expensive chair, upholstered in light brown leather, and crossing his fingers, placed his palms in front of him. The man made a strange gesture with his tongue, as if he were licking himself. It wasn't just Kate who had seen this. Students and female students noticed this peculiarity and often argued whether it was just a tic or whether he was hinting at something. Watson turned to the stranger. "I'm listening to you, young lady. Introduce yourself and describe the essence of your appeal to me," the man said. "Kate. I didn't get into the finance department yesterday," the girl told me. So what is it? What's your beef with us?" Vince still wasn't sure what he wanted, and so he tried to be very careful. Kate was silent for a moment, then looked Watson straight in the eye. "I'm so sorry. I worked very hard to get here. I came to you for a reason. I know you're a very decent and very wise man." Kate paused after almost every word, and she was very emotional, her big, beautiful breasts moving closer and closer to the rector until her ribs felt like they were against the edge of the table. Watson smiled ironically at first, thinking, well, there's a benefit to that, too, but then his face broke into a blissful smile of pleasure. Danny sat alone in the kitchen. He aimlessly took out and dipped the tea bag into the glass and thought about the girl he loved. What did she want? What was she missing out there? Why are we here at all? I should have talked her out of going. What now? Finally, Kate came in. She was in a bad mood, and Danny, seeing her, immediately thought, well, of course. It didn't work out for her. Well, Kate, was it worth it just to waste your nerves? Danny addressed the girl gently. He walked over to her and pressed her against his chest. Kate, unable to stand it, cried. Danny hugged her even tighter. Please don't worry so much. I'm with you, he mumbled. I did, said Kate, crying. Danny looked perplexed at the girl, barely restraining herself from sobbing. Why are you crying then? He kept wondering. From happiness, Kate proudly wiped away her tears and went into the kitchen. It was the first time she'd cooked Danny anything other than dumplings. 3 months had passed. Kate was already in her first year of finance school, and her boyfriend Danny was still working as a loader. The good news from work was that he had recently gotten a pay raise. There was a relative stability in the young couple's relationship. Kate began to spend more time on coziness and even tried to cook something. On the internet, she found interesting recipes for gourmet dishes. The first time she learned about pasta carbonara, about Greek salad, about mozzarella. She was not always able to portray a dish that fully corresponded to the recipe, but Danny was happy about any culinary endeavor of his beloved. Kate had no problems at the university. But what problems could there be for a freshman who had never had to deal with a session, a term paper, or a practicum? Kate periodically pleasured Watson. All this happened in his apartment. The man had no one to hide his private life from. However, he didn't want the connection with a freshman student to be known at work, and Kate immediately made it clear to the rector that it was purely a business connection in order to study at a difficult faculty and not to drop out at the first opportunity, which was a real enough prospect, given her poor knowledge. Nevertheless, Watson began to have tender feelings for Kate. The girl noticed these manifestations, and she felt uncomfortable. October was not an easy month for Kate. Her beloved Danny, her only support in a foreign city, was going to go to the army, or to be more precise, he was just called by the motherland. He had no money for evasion at all. His salary was barely enough for rent, groceries, and sometimes Kate's wants. No matter how much the guy explained to Kate that it was impossible not to go to the service at the moment, she didn't want to listen to anything he said. From time to time, she only asked him a provocative question, "So you are leaving me?" And of course, as was always the case with Kate, she gave no argument to support such an unpleasant conclusion about the young man. She honestly believed that Danny was betraying her. And one day the guy just stopped reacting to the girl's tantrums. He was gloomy and thought more and more about the future that awaited him with such an uneasy and willful Kate. It was especially hard for the young conscript to stand by the bus, about to leave for another male life, alone and watch the embrace of wives and husbands, boys and girls, mothers and sons. He had missed real affection and love for a long time. His family far away from him, and his beloved close, but as if distant. And the army service was even a kind of a lifeline for Danny. Danny wanted to forget about his personal problems for a while, and thought that a change of scenery would help him. But is it possible to run away from your own thoughts? Kate knew the day and even the hour of her lover's departure. At first she did not want to see him off, thinking, "Let him know I am offended." But something clicked in her soul, and she hurriedly packed, taking with her a small good luck charm, a keychain with a plush gray mouse, which she had bought long ago in her hometown. Almost all the conscripts had already taken their seats on the bus. There was an atmosphere of expectation and pleasant anxiety in the company of the guys. Only a couple of men and Danny were standing outside smoking. One of the conscripts struck up a conversation with him. "Why didn't anyone come to see you?" he inquired. "I'm not from here," Danny smiled sadly. "And what, there's no one here at all?" The guy took a deep puff and exhaled the cigarette smoke. "No one," Danny replied. In a minute, he was already finishing his cigarette alone, ready to get on the bus, but a familiar figure appeared in the distance. His face immediately brightened up, and his devastated heart was filled with happiness and hope. "Love," he said quietly without taking his eyes off the girl, blindly throwing the cigarette butt into the trash can. As the months passed, Kate wrote to her soldier less and less. She was frustrated by Danny's seemingly irresponsible attitude toward her. Now she had to combine school and work. She got a job as a hostess in a hotel and worked from evening till morning. Unfortunately, among the guests of the two-star hotel, it was customary to pester the young, beautiful hostesses with indecent proposals. Sleepy and tormented by the insolence of the tipsy hotel guests, the girl would go straight from work to the university. Her already unenviable motivation in her classes was reduced even more. Kate did not want to get used to such conditions and every day thought about possible ways out of such an unpleasant situation. Yes, she had always sought comfort in life, but at the same time she was not ready to endure long periods of discomfort on the way to that comfort. One day Watson noticed the girl's fatigue. They were lying in bed, eating delicious sushi from an expensive restaurant and drinking an Italian pink drink. "What are you doing, kid, so tired for the last day?" The rector asked. "I'm working now," Kate replied grimly. "Working? Why are you short of money?" he asked. "Well." The student sighed. "The only source of income is gone," the girl said. "How's that? What was that source?" he asked in surprise. Kate explained to Watson that she didn't want to discuss her personal affairs. She wrapped herself in a blanket. "I'll sleep some more," she mumbled. Watson thought for a moment. He drank and gazed at the young girl wrapped in a blanket lying next to him. She was his great fortune, a goldfish that had come to him in desperation. But now the rector didn't want their relationship to be based on mutual benefit. He realized he wanted more from Kate. "Kate." Vince said in a quiet voice, "Are you awake?" he asked. "No, I'm awake." What?" she said, almost contentedly. "I want to have a serious talk with you," he said. The girl remained silent in agreement to the conversation. "A meeting once a month doesn't suit me anymore. I'm a man, I need a steady partner. I'm getting tired of your excuses, I'll tell you that. I'll tell you what. You quit your job and I'll provide for you. You give up your apartment too. Come and live with me," said the rector. No, Vince, I don't want to live with you." "This wasn't the deal we made with you," she answered Watson immediately, without thinking. "Did you think it over well?" He looked earnestly at Kate, who had pulled herself up in bed. "You're going to take me out of your university, aren't you?" The girl hissed hatefully. Her face took on an expression of disapproval, and she squinted her eyes at Watson, waiting for him to respond. Kate, Calm down, the man put his arm around his young mistress and kissed her lips. I promise you, as long as I'm rector, you'll study here, and you won't have any problems with your studies. But that's all I can give you. He sank down on the bed, resting his head on the pillow, and crossed his arms, concluding, don't expect financial help if you don't want me to help you. His last words sounded confident and even a little harsh. By doing so, Kate could understand that what he said was not blackmail. It was the truth, and there was no other way. The lack of alternatives frightened the girl. That evening she realized that she had only one choice. Unless she left everything as it was and continued to torture herself with work, study, sleep life, having neither energy, nor time, nor mood, nor finances for personal life and maintaining her own beauty, which beautiful young Kate liked to do so much. Tired of her relationship with the old rector, of her work, and of her studies, which sometimes kept her awake, Kate sprawled on the couch in her rented studio and stared at the TV screen. She wasn't interested in the show she loved so much, so she turned it on for background while she thought about Vince's words. Am I really going to have to sleep with him all the time? She thought with disgust. What am I supposed to do? Besides, Danny won't know anything anyway. He never knows anything. A week passed, and Watson again called the girl to his place for a rendezvous. That day, Kate made a decision. The rector did not persuade her for a long time. She decided that she would live with him. Months went by, and then came the session that every freshman dreads. Kate, unlike her classmates, was extremely calm. She knew that if any of the teachers did not want to give her credit, Watson would arrange everything. The girl even had her own legend with him. Kate, this is the daughter of one of the rector's buddies, sitting in the State Duma. Kate liked to play the rich girl. She often teased Watson. Vince, I'm the MP's daughter and earrings are only 10 grand. How come? To the 50-year-old rector of a serious university, a solid man whom everyone reckoned with and knew as a competent specialist, it was very pleasant sometimes to feel at ease with this young, but not at all naive girl from the province. Her scandals, her jokes and wiggles made Watson feel like a student again, and many even remarked, it's as if you've changed, become younger. He tried his best to match his secret love, changing his closet completely and even his hair. Kate was increasingly sad, and if Watson only heard compliments about how young he had become, the girl, on the contrary, was more and more often told, you're exhausted, you look tired. At such moments she fell into despondency. Kate understood perfectly well relationships that do not bring joy change women for the worse. One day she got so homesick that she decided to write to her now much neglected, but still her boyfriend Danny. The girl agonized and didn't know how to articulate all the things that had accumulated in her soul. Danny had become even more dear to her, and she was ready to forgive him for trading her for the army. The young man wrote to her every month, and sometimes more often, but he didn't get a reply every time. The guy was even given a phone call once, but Kate didn't pick up the phone. She was on another date with Watson at the time. Still, Kate put her thoughts on paper as best she could. Hello, my dear Danny. I miss you very much. So many things happened to me here in Chicago. I met interesting people, a lot of great teachers. Oh, and I've even gotten to work, although you know how much I hate that. Anyway, it's hard here without you. Very hard. No one can ever replace you. You're the only one I love, and I'm counting the days until we meet. Come soon, we'll be together again. We'll walk in the park, eat our favorite orange ice cream, and watch soap operas together. I'm waiting. Kate hadn't noticed in her letter that she'd made several unconscious hints that she was in a relationship with someone. She had unwittingly justified herself to Danny. Without thinking or rereading her lines, the girl spritzed her boyfriend's favorite perfume on the piece of written paper and carefully folded the letter into an envelope. Had time to work, Danny reread his beloved's letter more than once or twice, as if he was trying to find something he didn't like in the text. So, no longer working, how does she live? On what? Danny wasn't so stupid that he couldn't see the obvious at all. Rather, he, like many others in his place, was just somewhere else on his subconscious mind, chasing away bad thoughts, not wanting to tarnish the image of his beloved Kate. The first suspicions in the girl's excessive determination began at Danny since the day when she came to the rented apartment with the news that she had entered the university after all. But he had to convince himself that Kate wasn't like that. Especially since, Danny knew, His girlfriend would never admit to anything bad if it had to do with her. It was the same after Kate's sudden letter. For several days, the soldier thought about how Kate managed not to work anywhere, and later he came to a simple conclusion: she was sponsored by her parents. Kate's session went well. She began to notice more and more that she was getting used to Watson, and she didn't like it at all. She consoled herself with expensive clothes, perfume, and jewelry, which her rich roommate gave her money for. One of the few on the course, Kate could afford fitness classes, the pool, and restaurants. And yet, she was unhappy. One cold winter day, the girl received a call from her mother. She told her the unpleasant news. "How? I thought you knew." Tati turned to her daughter in surprise. "No, Mom. I didn't know anything about it," she said. His mother informed Kate that Danny had heroically rescued 3 soldiers from a barracks that had caught fire during the night. But a flaming beam had fallen on top of him, and the soldier was now in a local hospital. His legs were injured. "So what? Is he an invalid now then?" my daughter asked anxiously. "Kate, well, you what? I don't know. You should come and see him, huh? Support the boy," Kate's mom said. "What am I, Mother Teresa, supposed to support everyone? He went in there without asking my opinion, and now I have to go comfort him," and hung up on me. Tati was so upset after her conversation with her daughter that she even let out a tear. It was not the first time she was hurt to see her daughter's indifference, arrogance, and selfishness. Where did I miss her kept popping up in the woman's mind. She sincerely did not understand how it could happen that from all sides, surrounded by affection and care, Kate could turn into a girl stone, insensitive to the troubles and difficulties of others. When Kate received the first letter from Danny after the incident at the service, she opened it with a kind of disgust, and everything written in it caused her feelings of pity and despair. The young man wrote as follows. "Kate, I was very happy about that letter you sent me a month ago. I reread it 100 times, feeling my Kate in those lines. I miss you so much too. It's been a disaster, but you probably know that. I rescued some guys from a fire. I got hurt. I can't even walk yet, but they say it won't last long. You'll be all right. I'm in the hospital now. I really want to get back to the unit. I like the service. But I'm still counting the days, just like you. And I know that we're 184 days away from our reunion. Baby, we're halfway there. Soon we'll be on the internet. They'll give me a cell phone. I'm going to be a grandfather. Anyway, I miss you so much. And jealous. Very jealous. But I'm sure there's no reason to be. You're just mine. I love you. Wait for the soldier." When Kate finished reading the letter, she tossed it on the table squeamishly. She began to doubt her desire to continue her relationship with her young man. The girl has long wanted to change something in her personal life, and change, without fail, for the better. It seemed to her more and more that Donnie was not for her. She was used to the best, she was dependent on public opinion, and her soul demanded new heights. Kate couldn't do it any other way. She couldn't admit to herself that she had something wrong or worse than others. And now she was finally broken. Kate decided to end her first long-term relationship, but she realized that now was not the right time to notify Dan about it. The girl was confident in her decision, so she was not afraid to delay the conversation with her young man. So, outwardly, her life had not changed. She still lived at Watson's place, went to her classes, and occasionally answered her lover's messages. In the hospital, Danny was indeed, as he wrote, bored. He realized that he missed important days of service, in which he could practice shooting, do physical exercises, listen to interesting classes on political and logistical training, and in general, the first 6 months of the guy in the army were for him a solid risentika. One call changed the usual way of life of the patient. His own father called him. Alex left the family when his son was only 11 years old. It was all the fault of constant quarrels with his wife. The husband was a military man, and often the whole family had to move to rented apartments. Alex constantly convinced his wife Grace, "You'll see, it'll all be over soon." But Chechnya started, and the man went to the war zone, leaving his wife with 5-year-old Danny. 2 years later, Alex returned to his family in his hometown with 2 stars on his epaulettes. He began working at a military unit not far from home, and stability seemed to have finally arrived. But poor Grace was devastated and broken. She had waited for her husband all their life together, raising their son alone, while her beloved Alex was climbing the career ladder. She fell out of love with her husband. Alex, who felt it all, did not miss the opportunity to have an affair with a young girl, the major's daughter. Rumors spread through the neighborhood incredibly quickly, and Grace filed for divorce. Danny, on the other hand, suffered little in the whole affair. No matter how little contact he had with his father, it was only positive for the boy. And his father, of course, was a role model for him. It was just not easy to watch his parents' periodic quarrels. And the divorce Alex and Grace tried to present the son so that he did not worry and did not get upset. They managed to convince the child that it was a necessity and that they were sure to remain friends and his father would visit him often. It went on like that for several years. But after high school, Danny never saw his father again. He had a new family, children. Now already a colonel, Alex dissolved into a new family life, slightly forgetting about his first family. And so his father's call startled Danny. When he saw the word Dad on the screen, his heart thumped hard in his chest. How happy Danny was to get that call. "Danny, hi. What are you doing? Are you being a hero or something?" Dad asked. "Hi, Dad." "Well, a little bit," he replied. "Yeah, I know all about it, Danny." I thought, "You old fool, you wouldn't join the army at all. You'd listen to your mama. She gave me a hard time, telling me how many times she wouldn't let you serve." "She did," laughed my father. "I didn't tell her anything. She found out later," the guy said calmly. "Ha ha ha, my man, my son." The father shouted proudly into the receiver. How are you? How's the family?" Danny asked, a little disgusted. "Yeah, it's okay, Dan. I'm not calling you to talk about life, son. I've already made the arrangements. I've got my own people at the Ministry of Internal Affairs. We've already got a place for you here for your services. So, come on, don't screw up. Finish your service honorably, and you'll be settled in life," he told him the good news. "Yeah? Dad." "I don't know," Danny said, puzzled. "It's kind of awkward," he said. "Uncomfortable? Ha ha ha, you're funny. Everything's comfortable. I have to go. My wife wants me to go." "Don't even say no." "Okay, bye," and put the phone down. Danny lay motionless in bed for 15 minutes. Gee, he thought, what if my legs remain a problem? By the way, although he listened every day to the comforting prognosis of the doctors, the fact that he still could not walk worried him. Nevertheless, his father's suggestion, or even rather, his father's demand, raised his spirits, and he was even more eager to get well soon and go on duty. Kate ran almost hysterically out of Watson's apartment and into the stairwell. She quickly packed her bag and caught a cab, just to get away from the place she hated, where she had to spend time with a man she didn't like. Vince had been demanding too much from his young student all night and all morning, and she was so disgusted with the way he looked at her, the way he was always smacking his lips at her and responding to that vile vulgarity, that she gave the driver the first option she could think of. The address of a classmate of Sasha's who lived alone in a rented apartment. Kate's request to stay with her for a couple of weeks did not embarrass Sami in the least. On the contrary, she was very glad that communication with soulless TV and telephone would dilute dialogues with a living person. During the week of living together with her classmate, Kate had managed to fantasize many options for the future events of her life. What's going to happen now, she asked herself. Will he kick me out of uni? Probably won't save me at the summer session. Kate was worried and even unhappy about her abrupt act. She had done everything to get into this educational institution. She saw the future of a rich, successful lady. Her specialty allowed her to spin in the right circles and perhaps gain valuable acquaintances and, who knows, maybe find love. She dreamed of going to a big, beautiful business center after college and becoming an assistant to the CFO. Her dreams were naive and silly. Perhaps even the idea of the biggest doll in the store was not so frivolous compared to her future plans for life. Unfortunately, 19-year-old Kate's dreams and aspirations consisted only of adjectives, albeit beautiful ones. In this life, she wanted something expensive, rich, successful, chic. The objects and actions in her ideal picture of the future were negligible. One thing the girl knew for sure, she didn't want to go back to the hated Watson. She had a new target now, a young third-year student named Dennis from the PR department. By the way, this faculty had recently moved to the main building, and Kate had seen the boy only 2 weeks ago. They had already touched each other a few times, and the girl felt a spark between them. One night after school, a conversation took place between Sammy and Kate. Sammy was an activist of the course and knew a lot about the life of the university and its students. Kate decided to find out something about her friend and came from afar. "Ah, do you know what faculty this is?" she asked. "PR? Kate, are you serious? We actually have that class too. Public Relations. Obi teaches it. I love that class. Especially the lecture about the company's brand was great," her roommate reminded her. Right. I remember. I was so bored I forgot," Kate interrupted Sammy, who was engrossed in such an unnecessary speech about her impressions. "Have you noticed that almost everyone has their own car from the second or third year? They're all kind of pompous. I guess they come from wealthy families," Sammy said to her friend. Her face was full of contempt. "Oh, what's the big deal? So a car, so wealthy. Are you jealous?" Kate said. "What's there to be jealous of? That their parents will spoil and coddle them all their lives. Nothing good comes out of that, you know." Sammy said confidently. "Yes, you are," Kate grinned ironically. "Yes, that's the one. A person is spoiled by excessive pampering and care," continued her friend. But Kate decided to stop the conversation, which was extremely unpleasant for her. She felt like Sammy was hurting her. And the most important thing she'd learned from her friend was that Dennis was a well-off boy. Her new plans were now much more like her original plans. Every day Kate met a guy named Dennis in the corridor on the first floor, and almost every day she saw him getting into his black Chevrolet, cheekily tossing aside an expensive cigarette butt. She'd seen pretty girls and guys from different faculties gather together behind the university building to smoke between classes, but she wasn't in the habit of doing so herself. This made it difficult to meet a third-year student from the PR department. So she decided to just approach him in the corridor. Kate caught a rare glimpse of Dennis sitting alone on the couch. He was typing a message to someone on his phone. Hi. I'm a freshman. I don't know where the English room is. Can you tell me?" she asked him. Dennis slowly shifted his gaze from the phone screen to the girl and examined her with an appraising look from head to toe. In front of him, he saw a slender beauty in heels with gorgeous long hair in a high ponytail. He could see Kate's hesitation and trepidation through her feigned equanimity, like an experienced Casanova. Hey, you're upstairs on the third floor. Office 307." The guy didn't get up from the couch and didn't introduce himself. He kept typing on his phone. Kate said a short thank you and headed up the stairs. She went up to the second floor and stood in the hallway for a few minutes. Then she went into the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror, and took out of her purse the expensive toilet water that Watson had given her money for. She spritzed it on herself a couple times and walked gracefully downstairs. Dennis was still sitting there alone. He saw a girl with a straight posture, shuffling confidently in her heels, heading toward the exit. The young man stood up and with a quick step caught up with Kate, who was already standing at the public transportation stop. "By bus." The guy smiled. "A cab." What?" Kate replied, trying her best to act like a bored girl with no interest whatsoever. "So, do you always take a cab home like this?" asked the new interlocutor. Kate was actually, of course, going to take the bus to Sammy's and then the subway. But how could she admit it to one of the prettiest third-year students at a prestigious faculty, the son of rich parents with his own car? The girl realized that comfort would have to be temporarily put on pause, since by the time of her first conversation with Dennis, she was sure that she would not go back to the rich sponsor in the person of the university rector. Dennis, the young man, held out his hand. "Kate," the girl replied, "I think it's going to rain soon. Maybe I could give you a ride. It's no use wasting money," he suggested. "Thank you, Denise, it's my pleasure. But I'm fine with money," Kate replied with a smile. She looked over her companion, meeting him fleetingly between couples and getting into the car. She didn't notice all his beauty and charm. Dennis was a young man in his early 20s. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and athletic. He was dressed in a white shirt and blue jeans. His bangs were combed back, according to the latest fashion. It was obvious that the guy had been to the barber's shop often. The first thing Kate noticed about his appearance was his large, handsome lips and wide cheekbones. His eyes were hidden behind the dark glasses he wore before leaving the university. "Come on, let's go." "How long is it going to take to get your cab?" he urged her. "All right." "Aha." "Okay, if you insist," she agreed. Dennis smiled and went with her to his car. Getting into the car, Kate pretended as if it happened to her almost every day, though in fact she'd ridden in an expensive car only twice in her life, and those were trips with Watson. Pulling onto the highway, the young man began a conversation. "What department are you from?" he asked. With financial, Kate replied. "Wow. Must be hard, huh?" Denise said. "Well, it's not for you and me to know what's complicated," thought Kate. "Well, you know, it was hard at first. It's easier now," she shared with her companion. "Oh, I'm from PR. We moved here a while ago." "Where are you from?" the guy asked. "I'm not from Moscow, if that's what you mean," Kate said, smiling. "I see," Dennis replied indifferently. "But I come from a rich family, so it's easy for me here. I have help. I'm good at school, of course, but my dad will always help me if I need it," Kate lied. "Wow." Dennis was intrigued. "Do you have him working here?" he asked. "No. Hire," she said. After giving the girl a ride home, Dennis pondered his new acquaintance's words and behavior as he headed back to his place. He was well aware of such individuals, and now he realized that Kate was a fake, trying to make up a price for herself by making up rich connections and a comfortable life. How many girls in those almost 3 courses had tried to get the attention of the handsome Denny from PR? It was already a kind of game for the guy. Despite not being serious about Kate's words, he appreciated her beauty and grooming. "I haven't had it with a provincial yet," grinned the self-satisfied young man. A few weeks passed and Dennis and Kate became closer. They went to the movies. The guy invited the girl to his place and even sometimes gave her a chocolate bar or a box of chocolates, as if to emphasize that their relationship was nothing more than a romantic friendship. But Kate had had enough for now. She believed that one day Dennis would look at her differently. Nothing bothered her about her relationship with him. She liked him a lot. They had fun and enjoyed each other's company, which was exactly what her Watson-weary soul lacked. Speaking of which, thinking about him was probably the only reason for her to be sad. He'd written her a nasty text message not long ago. "Ran away, Kate. You shouldn't be doing this. If you think I'm going to keep bailing you out for your once-a-month handouts, don't expect me to. Either you get smart and take responsibility for yourself now, like a big girl, or you're going back to your village. I'm sick of your dean resenting me." I don't think she believes me at all. "I think if you fail the exam, I'll tell her that my acquaintance is a simple laborer, a childhood friend, so they can kick you out. Think about what you need. Bye." The experienced Watson was sure that the girl would come to him again, but he did not expect it to come the day after his message. Kate stood on the threshold of his door with a guilty look. "Well, what are we doing? Come on in. Tell me what's gotten into your head." Kate, not answering anything, walked brazenly into the hallway, almost pushing away the man she hated, thanks to whom she was on the path to her dream. But the path was the most disgusting. She took off her shoes and went into the bedroom. "Kate, don't humiliate me," the man looked at her guiltily. "Just shut up," she said quietly. It wasn't easy to wake up in that familiar bed again with the realization that her dreams of a handsome, promising boy had vanished so quickly into thin air. But Kate realized she couldn't accept that defeat. That night, she resigned herself to the fact that she would have to see Watson for a while. However, she didn't think it was a good idea to end her sweet friendship with Dennis. The name Danny was becoming less and less associated with her. And yet she still hadn't decided to have a serious talk with her young man. It was spring. Kate got what she needed from each of her men. Watson gave her the assurance of a quiet, carefree university education, Denise, affection and good times, and Danny, a sense of home and love. She didn't want to change anything, but she realized that one day she would have to make a choice. Kate made up reasons to get away from Watson. They were usually calls from her hometown relatives asking her to come over. She made up all sorts of things about her mother and father. One day she even had to invent a silver wedding to which she had to come. Watson had been gloomy and distrustful during the days of Kate's departure, but he was not going to follow her and look for the one who was the real reason for the girl's frequent absences. The rector understood that his age was upsetting to young Kate and even allowed himself to think quietly about her having fun with someone younger. He just didn't want Kate to fall in love with someone seriously enough to spit on the university, and thus on her future career. Dennis was occasionally spotted with a freshman provincial girl, one who had neither her own car nor her own apartment in Chicago. Sometimes, during fun student parties and hangouts, the guy's friends would ask him about the girl. One day, one of these interrogations hit him hard. Dennis had thrown a loud party in his apartment that day, just for the insiders. "Dennis, what's up with this one?" "Everyone is shocked. Why did you get involved with her, Adrian?" a drunken classmate asked him. "I have nothing, Toch." "What's it to you?" asked Dennis. Adrian could barely stand on his feet, but he felt it was his duty to have a serious conversation with his naive friend and keep him away from what he thought was a greedy, money and real estate hungry person. "Adrian, go to bed, huh? I'll take care of this myself." Denise walked his friend to bed, and he sat alone in the kitchen smoking for a long time afterward. That same day, the guy noticed Anya, one of his best friends on the course, looking at him with a smirk. Somewhere in the corner of the room, two of his college buddies were talking quietly, and for some reason it seemed to him that his relationship with Kate was also being discussed. All this speculation finished the golden boy, and in the morning, when Dennis had seen off all his sleepy and not yet fully sobered friends, he decided, "We have to finish with her." Kate could feel her relationship with her lover growing strained lately, and on the day he called her back to his place, she, just like Denise, planned to be frank about her feelings. They were lying in crystal white sheets that had recently been dry cleaned. On the nightstand, a couple of uneaten rolls from the restaurant were left on a plate, and 2 glasses and a bottle of liquor stood nearby. "Kate, we need to talk," Dennis said softly to the girl. "Yes, you're right. I want to talk too," she replied. "Well, let me go first." "Kate, I think we should call it a night," he told her bluntly. The girl at first wanted to throw a tantrum and ask, "How so?" but she was silent for a while, thinking something over, and then, trying to hide her disappointment, she said, "I was going to suggest that to you, too," she said. Dennis hadn't expected such an answer from Kate. He even believed in the sincerity of her words, and later even felt as if the girl had hurt something inside him. Was it ego? Kate began to appear in Watson's apartment more and more often. She got used to him and to the whole environment around her. The girl even began to cook for Valadia, who was tired from work, which was extremely surprising for him. She began to call him by his name more often too. "Stability is not so bad," soothed herself, sometimes resigned to an unhappy life, student provincial. In the Tyler family there was a joyful event. The son stood on his feet for the second time in his life. And this time was especially significant, because Danny's relatives have already begun to worry about the fate of the boy. However, Private Tyler was in no hurry to be discharged, and he remained in the hospital for some time. A friend from the city came to visit him. It was not difficult, because Danny served not so far from home. "Hey buddy, how are you?" Comrade Reese exclaimed with a smile. "That's great. Thanks for stopping by." He got out of bed. The two of them hugged, and Reese noticed a wheelchair behind the hospital bed. "Hey, Denin, is this your kind of thing?" He laughed at the top of his voice. "Well, Reese, you, a true friend." Laughing at someone who's sick, Danny smiled. But he wouldn't stop. Reese was a funny guy, and he never missed an opportunity to fool around and make his friends laugh. Reese carefully loaded himself into the wheelchair and began to make circles around the small hospital room. "EVOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOO Dani had no choice but to smile silently and stare at the ever-crazy Reese, who so loved to give his positivity to others, even if sometimes it was completely inappropriate. One evening after the pair, Kate went to Watson's apartment and found that no one was home. She dialed Vince, but he didn't answer the phone, and later her attempts to reach him were futile. She fell asleep without realizing where her lover had gone. In the morning, while getting ready for university, Kate received a text message from him. "Don't wait up for me tonight. I've got things to do." Watson didn't arrive home until 3 days after his disappearance. He looked tired, but as if happy. He looked tired, but happy, as if happy. Kate saw this, and it was so strange to her to suddenly feel jealous. "What? Am I jealous of him lying in bed with Watson?" The girl was horrified by her feelings. Vince had been single for 10 years. He had married rather late, at the age of 35. His wife was a young woman with a small child in her arms. For the short 5 years of their marriage, Vince had raved about having a child of his own, but Sami just wanted happiness and peace with the man she loved. She deceived him all these years, but later gave up and told her husband that she could not have children after a difficult labor. Watson, for those 5 years, loved Sami very much, but could not forgive her deception. However, the main reason for his departure was that he was categorically not ready not to leave behind an heir. And if Sami was initially honest with him, these, though not easy, but happy and full of love and mutual understanding relationship would simply never have happened. Therefore, Watson, whatever you say, was grateful to his former spouse. For 10 years, he had changed one woman for another for a third, but he could not find happiness even slightly similar to what he had with Sami. That reason for Watson's long absence from home was Sami. The woman asked her ex-spouse for financial help. She was in the hospital with female problems. Vince reacted instantly, and not only sent money, but also came to Sami with support. For 3 days, he felt like he was in the family. He didn't need to prove anything to his ex-wife. He could be who he really was. He dressed himself simply because he realized that Sami had always loved him for who he really was. Why love him? He knew for sure. Sami still loves me. A week later, Watson was gone again. Kate wallowed in laziness, apathy, and self-pity. She even missed a few days of school. She was seriously jealous of Watson. It both frightened and tormented her and continued to amaze her. It was Wednesday. Kate stayed at home. At 11 o'clock in the morning, she was still in bed and didn't think about getting up. Her cell phone vibrated nearby. She saw the name Donnie on the screen. It was a text message from the private. Kate had gotten used to having nice short conversations with the guy. She decided that she would let him know about the breakup of the relationship when he got better. The sleepy girl read it. "Kate, I'm finally going. All is well. Beloved. Only 70 days to go." 70 days, Kate said aloud with horror. Is it really that short already? Is it really 2 months? She sighed sadly. Now Danny's back on his feet, and he's doing well. Even more puzzling were her plans to tell Danny about the breakup. Meanwhile, the relationship with Watson was getting worse. Vince didn't demand anything from Kate now. He'd come to his house and was happy to have the young, beautiful girl there for company, so he wouldn't be bored sitting alone watching a political program. Kate felt it all the sharper, and hatred and pain boiled in her soul. How could this be? How could she, the best, the most beautiful, and the most desirable, stop being interested in the ugly 50-year-old, eternally youthful rector? Watson's behavior hit Kate's self-esteem very hard. She began to think more and more often about her young man, who was somewhere far away from her, doing his duty, showing courage and bravery. The news that Danny was now walking had actually had more of an impact on her than she'd realized. Kate just didn't want to admit it, but the issue of a man's physical health was extremely important to her. She didn't want to commit her life to someone who would bring her any inconvenience or unnecessary worry. Another call from her mother helped transform her thoughts about Danny into a desire to stay with him and wait for him from the army. Tatiana Sergeyevna had some interesting information for her daughter. "Kate, your dad's going to get you a job at the Home Office. But I'm asking you, please don't tell anyone. Alex came by to see me and my dad. He asked how you were doing in Chicago. Are you waiting?" "Well, I said you were." Mom said. "Ah, I'm waiting." Mom, Kate replied nonchalantly. "Don't be silly. Look at me," Tati continued sternly, as if she hadn't heard her daughter's words. "Danny's an enviable guy. You won't find another one like him in Chicago. You understand that, I hope?" Her mother told her intelligently. Kate turned gloomy after talking to her mother. How many stupid things she'd done. But she didn't want to admit it anyway. She just decided for herself that she had to get Danny back. It was a beautiful, cool June evening. Kate was just staying at Watson's place, nothing more. He was almost always away from home, and it was tacitly agreed between them that the girl should keep the apartment in order. She couldn't figure out how to solve her complicated problem. Danny was about to return from the army. She was staying with Watson, and without him she couldn't finish these 4 years, which were going to be even more complicated, and most importantly, she had no job and no money of her own to pay for housing and even the most basic needs. All these thoughts were rattling around in her head, and she seemed to be going crazy. Watson was home that evening. He was as calm and even a little romantic as ever. He was the first to make conversation. "Why are you so tense?" the man asked. "Me?" "No, Vince." "It's okay," Kate said. The man, of course, did not believe his roommate's words. However, she never tried to hide her tiredness and sadness. "Kate, and let's..." Watson started talking. What she asked, interrupting him. "Let me just let you go already," he told her. "But Vince, I can't," Kate said. "Can't I charge you intimacy for the opportunity to study with me?" Watson interrupted her sharply. "Vince," Kate said quietly, "I'm tired of being so cynical about you. Get out of here tomorrow. I'll make my own arrangements. They'll give you a job in the dean's office. You'll make good money. In the meantime, you'll work in admissions." "I can't just throw money at you," said the man resolutely. "Vince, I didn't ask for this. Mom and Dad send me money," Kate answered quietly. "Yeah, what are they sending?" "For the apartment, your gadgets, your fitness equipment, good food." "For what?" "No, I won't let a beauty like you beggar me. If you need this university, then study and work. And then, who knows? Maybe I'll find something better for you through my acquaintances," he suggested. Kate didn't know what to say to Watson's sudden generosity. She was uncomfortable accepting his offer, but it sounded like the right thing to do, and she had no other options for solving the problem at hand. And it was a problem that needed to be solved as soon as possible. A week later, Kate sat in the admissions office and thought back to herself. She was more confident and determined than ever, ready to go all the way, no matter what it cost her. Now it was like she was different. She felt stuffy and heavy with herself. But such thoughts were not usually characteristic of the self-loving and proud Kate, so she constantly tried to chase away the sadness and uncertainty in the correctness of her actions. That long-awaited beautiful day in every soldier's life had come. It was Danny's discharge day. It was a hot August day, and it promised to be a very fun day for the boy and his friends and girlfriends. The boys had already planned the whole program of congratulations. SGT. Tyler, of course, intended to drop in on his family first, and then he was at his friend's disposal. He was most anxious to see Kate, for the last time he had seen her had been at the bus stop. He cherished the little Teddy Mouse as a memento of the day his beloved had come to see him off at the service. Danny lay on his army metal bed for the last time. He held the toy in his hand and thought about his future life in the civilian world. Since Danny was not naive at all, he realized that anything could happen there. He was especially worried about his favorite girl. The night was warm, and the heat kept Danny awake until almost 2 in the morning. There were more and more thoughts, and even suddenly a deep, overwhelming sadness came over him. He quietly got out of bed and quickly made his way to the window. When he opened it, he breathed the fresh August air into his chest and cried. It was scary and unsettling to return to a familiar life, to that world, where there were no commanders, no 11 o'clock at night, no drill, where it was much easier to face failures, to lose heart at any difficult moment, to give oneself an indulgence. Nevertheless, the day of discharge came, and with its arrival, Sergeant Tyler's heavy thoughts faded away. He bid a heartfelt farewell to his new friends, his fellow officers, some of whom he had known for almost a year. The gates of the compound closed behind Vince. He looked at the familiar forest landscape and said to himself, freedom. Near the liquor store, a favorite meeting place for the youth of the district, about 15 people were waiting for the demobo. The time was nearing 6 o'clock in the evening. There were friends and girlfriends of the guy, and fellow officer Danny Cavan came to this completely unfamiliar company. Cavan was one of the men Danny had rescued from the burning barracks. waiting for Reese, Kate, and the man of the party. A noisy company was going to celebrate a friend's demobilization in a park 2 kilometers away from the store. Kate and Reese called Rin, the person in charge of the event. Both of them promised to come a little later and asked not to wait for them. Here came Danny himself. So many friendly hugs, girls' kisses, and kind words in his address the guy had not received in total in his whole life. A couple of his friends had already managed to be happy for their friend and were a little tipsy. "Hey, why are you really drinking without me?" Jokingly indignant at the demob. "Wait for you," Rin replied. "Max, where's Reese?" Danny looked around and didn't find his old friend. "Yeah, he's delayed. He said it was a surprise," Rin replied. Danny wasn't worried about his beloved. In the morning, she made him happy with her tender message. "Zay, I'll be there today. Just don't wait for me. I'll come to our place myself. I'm afraid I'll be late." "I'll get ready." The company went to the park. Danny was in a different mood than she had been the night before. The guy was having fun with his friends, surrounded by beautiful girls, and Rin also bought a huge amount of alcohol and the best kebab in the store. The day was clear and warm. Life was just beginning. But for some reason, he was troubled by thoughts of Kate. No, he didn't doubt that she would come, but for some reason he had a feeling of distress. Half an hour after the company of young people had settled down on the grass under a huge oak tree with drinks and a brazier was set up nearby, Reese came, or rather arrived. The guys didn't realize anything at first, and someone even gasped loudly how. Reese, the young man, rode his wheelchair towards his surprised friends and waved at them. "You didn't recognize him. What are you looking at?" "Reese, are you stupid? Where did you get it from?" Izzy couldn't help herself. "Let it be a secret." His friend looked at Danny with a full-mouth smile. "It's mine," said Danny, "but how did you steal it? And more importantly, why?" he asked. Reese told the boys about how he had to persuade the nurse to secretly take away the wheelchair for the night, ostensibly for a very important case, and she, under the influence of the charm of the unrivaled Reese, agreed to his request. "Don't worry, folks. It's a backup. We'll get it back tomorrow," Reese concluded. Very quickly, almost no one of this merry company was left sober. Girls and guys took the stroller for a ride and made each other laugh, falling from it to the ground, chasing each other with shouts for the whole park, and just resting on it in between portions of kebab and alcohol. In short, everyone was having fun here. It was getting dark. A few people had left. The crowd grew quieter. They began to talk about the army. Those who had not yet been through the ordeal listened attentively to Danny and the other servicemen. There were some guys who weren't shy about telling about their time away. The most frequent topic was, of course, the exploits in the barracks. As a shy person, Danny tried not to talk about it much. But everything he said made a strong impression on his friends. "Well, Dennis, I'm shocked at you," the beautiful Rita, Sam's girlfriend, listened to him in surprise. From afar, Danny saw a familiar silhouette slowly approaching the celebration site. She, finally. How beautiful, thought the still-in-love Danny. He was so stunned by the gorgeous appearance of his beloved that he completely forgot that he had sat down to rest in his stroller, which he had once needed. He only scrutinized the expression on the face of the approaching pretty beauty in high heels and skinny jeans, and he was overcome with pride in front of his friends and buddies. Everyone knew and saw that Kate was his girlfriend. As he stared at her, he saw her meet his gaze, and suddenly her face twisted. Kate walked even slower, and then stopped. Someone in the crowd laughed. "Danon. Ah ha ha. Take pity on your girlfriend." Already all the guys and gals in the company picked up the laughter, and only Danny was still looking at Kate, but only now not with enthusiasm, but as if waiting to see what she would do next. Kate's mind was a mess. She didn't know how to act or what to do, but she couldn't hide the feeling of disgust from her young man. She was ready to turn and leave the park, never to think of the man who had betrayed her and deceived her, but she turned white. Danny silently got up from the stroller and looked her straight in the eye without taking his eyes off her. The crowd of already drunken friends was laughing furiously, some of them even rolling around on the grass. It never occurred to anyone that Danny wasn't laughing at all at this point. No one saw the unpleasant chemistry between the two. They didn't want people to pay attention to such subtleties when there was an atmosphere of unrestrained fun around. Kate slowly walked over to the group of guys and hugged Danny. They tried to communicate kindly, as they usually did. All evening and all night Kate had been ridiculously nice to her boyfriend. She brought him drinks, tried to share the kebab, and kept unnaturally trying to kiss or hug him. It all happened at the most inappropriate moments, and her falseness was obvious to Donnie. The rest of us were just having a good time. By 1 o'clock in the morning, the noisy group had gone home. Kate and Donnie walked in silence to the Swan's apartment. "Are you leaving tomorrow?" Donnie asked calmly. "No, I wanted to stay a week or two." "Well, you understand," the girl smiled. Donnie interrupted her with, "Good night. See you later." Kate watched Donnie's figure slowly moving away, disappearing into the shadows of the maples. She was deeply troubled. The young man didn't even hug her goodbye, and before the army they had always parted with a kiss. The next day, Kate called Donnie asking for a meeting. The young man reluctantly agreed. He did realize, after all, that it was always worthwhile to talk to the man. But overnight he had decided to change his personal affairs drastically. Kate was even more beautiful than her yesterday's self when she met with Danny. Danny, on the other hand, was gloomy. What he was about to say to the girl he had once loved dearly and tenderly was still causing him a certain amount of uncertainty and anxiety. The two of them were sitting at a table on the summer veranda of an Armenian restaurant. They looked like a young, handsome couple. Two ladies in their 60s a couple tables away had decided to relax in the restaurant with a cup of tea and cake. They watched Vince and Kate with a sense of nostalgia. One of them turned to her friend. "Oh, they're just getting started. And there's so much more to come. There's so much to look forward to." Kate told the guy about her interesting experience of studying at university. Danny shared a couple of incidents from the army life. "You saved people, didn't you?" Kate asked. "Well, there is such a thing," the young man replied indifferently. "How modest you are, and manly." Kate threw herself at the guy's neck, but immediately felt strong hands on her shoulders, which easily but surely took her aside. "Kate, I saw the look in your eyes yesterday. It told me everything," he said grimly. "What are you talking about?" Kate looked at the boy in surprise. "I'm not stupid. I understand," Danny continued in the same indifferent tone. "You don't know anything. They told you about me, and you believed it." The girl was indignant. "I didn't say I knew anything. I only said that I understand," he added after a moment's silence. "But what else is there to know?" he asked. Kate blushed in embarrassment, realizing she'd said too much. She stood silently waiting, as if Donnie had something else to say to her. "You see, I just had an epiphany," the young man added. "He's back on his feet. He's seen the light. You're all good, all right. What about me?" Kate, as she often did, went into her usual tantrum. "Oh, you can do it. You're good. You're not like me. You need more. You should see the world, see people. You're getting a college degree." "I'm sorry," Danny said. When she heard those words, which sounded so much like the pity Kate hated for herself, she cried. This, as it seemed to her, was the last hope to save the relationship with the man who, as she now finally realized, was the best for her. "Don't cry." Goodbye. Danny took 2,000 rubles out of his wallet, which was more than enough to pay the bill, and left. For a while, Kate sat in her parents' apartment and barely left her room. Fortunately, the university was still on vacation, and the girl could afford to mope. The realization that she was alone now made her very sad. But she didn't blame herself in the slightest for it, as before. Kate was furious with Donnie. She added him to all the blacklists and deleted all his friends from her page and tried to tarnish his image as much as possible. She presented all the events to her friends and female friends who knew Dan poorly, so that it seemed as if he was mentally abnormal and in general a tyrant and a dangerous person. It seemed that Kate herself was beginning to believe such a portrait of her ex-boyfriend's personality. The last thing she found out about Danny was that he'd taken a job with Internal Affairs. August was over, and it was time to go back to Chicago to fit in her studies and learn the new job she owed to Watson. For the first school month, Kate hadn't heard from her former lover, but curiosity gripped her. She sometimes asked herself, "I wonder how my old man is doing." One day in early October, she met him at a university event. Watson smiled politely and walked past. She didn't know it at the time, but the man thought about that fleeting encounter all day. Kate was still interested in a young and promising option. She was unpleasant and painful to remember about Dennis, but she was ready to try her luck with such a guy again. As the months went by, nothing new was emerging in Kate's relationship. It was all the fault of Danny, whom she was still thinking about. She was foolishly naive, believing that he was just playing with her feelings and was bound to start biting his elbows over his recklessness. She didn't want to write to him first. Her pride wouldn't let her. So she waited for his congratulations. She waited for a simple, non-committal message from him or a suggestion to go out. She waited for apologies and declarations of love, but Danny was silent. Another year of Kate's university studies had passed. She crossed paths with Watson several times during this year, and they even had a pleasant conversation. The man seemed genuinely interested in the girl's successes at school and at work. It was the middle of summer. It was the middle of summer, the time when exams and credits were over and I could rest. Kate couldn't stand her ex's silence after all, and decided to write herself. There were only 6 words in her message. "Will you stop playing games with me?" She didn't write hi, or "How are you hoping to impress Danny?" All day she waited for an answer and fell asleep with a bitter feeling. What if this really is the end? The next day, however, she received a reply, but not the one she had expected. The first thing that surprised her about Danny was that he didn't text her, he called her. His name on the phone screen popping up while waiting for a response had the girl excited. "I knew it," she thought. "Kate, hi," he said. Hey, how am I supposed to talk to you?" Kate asked cheekily. "What are you talking about?" "Kate, what am I calling about?" He started talking. Kate interrupted Donnie, continuing her little tantrum. "You think I'm supposed to just forgive you like that?" "Kate, stop. Let me get this straight. I got married back in October. I picked up my wife from the hospital the day before yesterday. I'm sorry I didn't answer right away," he said. There was an awkward pause. "Are you there?" Danny asked after a few minutes, but there was a short beep in response. Kate cried and lay in bed and pushed the phone away. It was unbearably hard and painful for her. He was happy now and happy without her. How to survive such a nightmare? After a few weeks, Kate's unhappy love began to be forgotten. Just as the first boy who had hurt her had been forgotten. Just as all the boys before Danny had been forgotten. Just as the charming and handsome Dennis had been forgotten. The young, attractive girl had nowhere to go. There were other relationships ahead, even more promising, even more romantic, even better. Third year came, then fourth year, and Kate never missed an opportunity to meet someone interesting. They were both faculty and students, and a few of them developed short-lived relationships. In the end, as usual, the girl was not satisfied with something, and she politely made it clear that she did not want to see each other anymore. Kate was now avoiding the likes of Denise. There in her hometown for 18 years of life, the girl had almost no reason to doubt her beauty, desirability, and exclusivity. Here in Chicago, in the big city, where there is such a hustle and bustle that sometimes you forget to call your family. A lot of guys didn't appreciate her more than their words. It's okay. To please the most eligible suitors, Kate later realized. It wasn't enough just to be beautiful and brazen. And yet she wasn't going to change her habits and attitudes, and most importantly, her love for herself and her carefree life. 22-year-old Kate, a finance graduate, had her heart set on staying in Chicago forever and marrying well. All these years, Watson had unsuccessfully called Kate, whether for a cup of tea, a walk through the Park Estate, or simply to his home. In fact, his appearance was almost unchanged. A neat business look, a purposeful look, and almost no gray hair. Kate didn't want to give up. She had agreed to an unhappy life with the 54-year-old head of the university, though the thought had flashed through her mind more than once over the years. During the last 6 months of her studies, Kate began to notice that Watson had disappeared. He didn't talk about him on the sidelines. He wasn't present at important events and activities. Amelie was the head girl of the group. One day Kate decided to casually ask the girl where their rector had disappeared to. "And this one, our rector. What's his name?" Kate looked at Alice questioningly, pretending to be thoughtful. "Do you mean the new one or the old one?" the girl asked. "What do you mean?" asked a stunned Kate. "If you mean Watson, he's in Duma now," the girl answered her. "Like, in Duma?" Kate wondered. "Sort of, if I'm not confused," Amelie concluded. That same night, Kate scoured the internet to find any evidence that Vince was now an MP. And she did. Under his picture on a government website was a post that clearly indicated Watson had gone for a promotion. The beautiful images of her future life flashed through Kate's mind. She didn't hesitate to open the old chat room, the message from Vince that had been waiting for 2 months. It was an offer to go to the Amadeo Modigliani exhibition. Kate decided not to write to Watson, but to dial his number right away. "Vince, I'm sorry I haven't answered. I'm studying for exams. Is the exhibit still open?" she asked. "You're Kate." Of course it closed. Watson hesitated for a few seconds and then added, "One closed and one opened. We live in Chicago," he said. That once angry and annoying Kate, for the first time, seemed so nice and pleasant that she even smiled happily. "And call me that more often." "I'll allow it," she said. A year later, Kate married Watson. She had to put up with a lot, and her philosophy of boundless self-love and indifference to others could not produce the results she had imagined in her dreams of an ideal life. First of all, Kate was disturbed and annoyed by Svetlana's presence in her husband's life. She often made scandals with Vince and asked him not to mention the one who, according to her, was ruining their beautiful family. In bed, the husband began to suit the young wife less and less, and it was not even about his physical abilities, but the fact that all her life, striving for the ideal, Kate had to put up with the fact that she fell asleep with an old man with a loose, shapeless body. Instead of admiring a young, masculine beauty, and Kate's carefree days of idleness were soon forgotten. No, she didn't get a job. Of course, she'd been on her husband's sponsorship since the early days of their marriage. It was just that Kate was now woken up almost every night and forced out of bed by a little screaming miracle named Greg, the one for whose sake the girl was ready to forgive Watson all his imperfections. When the boy was a year old, the girl realized that she should not forget about herself, about her pleasures and pleasant moments in life. Every summer Watson, at his wife's request, sent her and the child abroad for vacation, but he rarely came himself, due to the workload. It was hard not to be charmed by the handsome, young and tanned men at the resort. One day, while Greg was with the nanny, Kate met a tall, muscular Turk in a bar near the sea. They spent all evening and all night trying to understand each other in broken English, but almost all of their conversation consisted of smiles, laughs, and incredulous glances. A hot night happened to Kate for the first time in many years of marriage. These inexpressible sensations of intimacy with a handsome Turkish boy, even if he did not speak a word, right on the shore of a wild beach, were remembered by the young wife and mother for many months to come. On the day of her meeting with Eunice, it was as if Kate had tacitly decided for herself how the rest of her life would go. That her whole life would be about compromise from now on. The main priorities of family life were Greg's happiness and health, a good relationship with her husband, and of course a little pleasure for herself. One frosty February afternoon, young dad of 2 sons, Danny Tyler, checked out the page of his once very fervent and sincere favorite Kate. Aha. So Vatsana, he looked at the username. The man went into the girl's pictures. There was no mysterious Watson in any of them, but there was a little boy who looked a lot like Kate. Some unpleasant sensation prickled in Danny's chest. He felt jealous. Kate had once been his and could continue to be. He was happy with his wife and children, of course, but it felt too right. The man remembered how much fun they had together. He even missed the women's tantrums and frustrations. "I'm sick of this. I'm like a volcano with you." He had once resented the girl. But peace was coming fast too. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Danny realized that his girlfriend was fickle, unstable, and always looking where it was better and more profitable. But he put up with it, because she was so good, and he'd always missed her for a sense of fulfillment. He hadn't realized it himself, but Kate had once been a mandatory person in his life. Judging by the photos, Watson provided for his wife's child very adequately. Danny realized that she lived in Chicago, yet was hardly ever there. The landscapes of Turkey, Egypt, Spain, and many other countries were the backgrounds of images with Kate and her son. It was as if something had changed in her appearance. Her lips became bigger, and her face took on a slightly different oval. Gone were the little cheeks that Danny loved so much. Instead, there were cheekbones. The young mother posed in all the photos almost professionally in a look that was even too much revelation. She was tanned, bright, she was even slimmer than before. "You're different now," Denny whispered sadly to himself. He decided to see what she wrote about her life. In the past, at least, she liked to post philosophical notes on her wall and status, to write about her feelings. She hasn't changed in this. Only now the content of her posts was a bit different. Love yourself. A woman has no better makeup than happiness. Kate Watson's Gestalt Psychology. Donnie read all her posts and looked at the staged photos of her with the same insincere smile and wondered. So a psychologist. That's funny. Why did she go to school in the first place? Oh, I see, Watson, he guessed. Daddy. Misha didn't put the Lego together. Daddy, 5-year-old Vladik shouted from the living room. The man came to his senses. He caught himself that, no matter how much he deceived himself, he had not succeeded in achieving complete indifference to her. About to close Kate's page, he looked at her status. Sooner or later, early, tears dry up and wounds heal, quarrels subside and nights sleep. Everyone gets what they want. I hope you got that, Danny said with a sad smile. He turned off his laptop and went to his beloved children and wife.